God, the clock starts. Hi, I'm Chris. Hi, Chris. Thank you guys for being here. This type of stuff doesn't happen without an audience and without people doing all of this production. I've run a bunch of conferences in my life, and it's really hard to do. So thank you to everyone who put this on. That's me. That's my dogs. I'm from the States. I'm sorry. Deal with it. That's my career path. I've been in security for 25 plus years. I'm an apex attacker. I identify as a hacker. You identify as whatever you want to. That's what I do. We do stuff like pen testing. We do application security, code review. You know, all of you have probably tried these things. Super effective, by the way. Social engineering. Anyone? Yeah. Risk assessments. Yep, do those too. Yeah, incident response. Yeah, good times. We also do red teaming. That was actually one of my guys falling through a ceiling on a gig. And I continue to use it to this day because it's hilarious and it really pisses him off. We do purple teaming, which you'll hear about more and more and more of. Physical security, we do quite a bit of that, whether that's breaking into places, showing people how to actually steal the gold from the bank versus pretend steal the gold from the bank, or write it down in a paper and say, you have this risk of somebody stealing the gold. Yeah, prove it. Okay, scales are broken. I'm sorry, I'll probably make a bunch of the speakers mad, but most of the scales are awful that we use in security. That's kind of why we're not doing any much better than we used to, right? So one of the ways that we measure security is we see how much money we can stack up in the wall, and we go, hey, can a hacker jump over this? I spent $1 billion. That's how good my security program is. Guess what? Doesn't work. Compliance, that's working super good. We've had that. I mean, people just make up their own all over the place. Guess what? Back to the DBIR, how we doing? Still not doing so good. Okay, Jane Fonda agrees, right? Under the bell jar of compliance, the only thing that blooms is rage. Anyone ever feel that about compliance and certification? Yes, laughing and going, oh, I hate it. Vulnerability scanning, we all say, oh yeah, you gotta scan for vulnerabilities. That's how you can measure yourself. I'm like, well, if you want to really be depressed, and you want to really, really be unhappy about your life as a professional, as a company, your support structure, pretty much everything fundamentally that you feel in security, just look at vulnerability data. It'll make you feel awful all the time. P.S. We'll never get better. There's always going to be a new vulnerability, which means you're never going to hit success, ever. No matter what you do, if you measure your program based on vulnerability, you can prepare to fail for the rest of your life. Gonna happen that way, right? Graphs are a great way to show people stuff. How does that work? Like, what the hell does any of this mean? You have 11 bad today. Like, out of what? Was it 11 out of 11? Was it 11 out of 11 million? What does any of that shit mean? That's crazy. And this is how we pretend to measure our programs. We just make up make-believe graphs and we go, I feel kind of good about this. Look, that one had an iceberg. I don't know what Rapid7 was thinking when they decided iceberg for measurement, I guess. Does any of this make sense, or am I just, yeah, sorry, I guess I'm Paul's prick. So, I'm not the Putin guy. We do pen testing, right? That works super well. We just go in, beat the hell out of people. They come out bruised on the other end. They heal, and we're like, let's beat them up again. It's a hard life. We could also measure it just by like how burned out we are, which is another measurement. You could just be like, look, I've been in this so long. I've officially reached like the full-on Yoda state where like I have to say things in reverse and talk in weird tongues, and then people are like, well, they probably know what they're talking about. They look like they're crazy burnt out on security. Now that really works, right? So we have to kind of deconstruct why those things aren't working to figure out what can we do to actually measure a program that works? Because that's really what we want to do, and we want to go home. We want to feel proud of ourselves. We want to be proud of our company. We want to do what we all set out to do. I mean, my version of the world of being an attacker is to be the sparring partner to make sure that whomever I'm sparring with gets better. I can't just run in and beat them up and throw them out of the ring and be like, you'll never be in the ring, right? Like, I have to kind of work with them. You have to start. I have to teach them how to throw punches. I have to get them to understand what pressure feels like and that they can actually survive that pressure, right? Do you think compliance does that for you? I mean, aside from the pressure of your auditor coming in and being like, we're going to fine you or give you some material check mark that everyone else gets mad about, but it doesn't build a lot of confidence. That's what we need in security programs, right? This is how we do it. We start a test, we measure all the bad, and then we figure out how do we recover. And then, just like a bunch of the other speakers have said today, well, you know, there's 20 things that we found, but we can really only fix 5 of them. The rest of them just have to be that way. Super depressing, right? Like, that doesn't make me want to go do another test. Fair? Yeah. So we have to figure out how to make positive relationships, right? This is the positive intentions, right? We need to set positive intentions for our programs, right? We have to make sure that we're not debt-based. We're not just only creating debt. We're not leaving the environment worse than where we started. And I can say that over and over again as somebody who spent 25 years leading the security industry, whether it is building conferences, teaching people how to break into weird places, doing trainings, all of the way back to risk. I mean, I've written a bunch of the standards trying to help in those things, but what you need to have is collaboration. You can't just go and judge people, right? We can't just run to the okay, we're gonna hit the bad button, and then hand it to you and be like, look, you should be happy. This is all the stuff you could improve on. Good luck. Right? That's a really hard way to assess your program. We also have to understand the difference between precision and accuracy. Has anyone ever had this conversation? Right? Like, if I say that I am accurate, I could just go like this and shoot at the door, and if I hit the door once, I could be like, I hit the door. Now, I might have by accident shot all the other people in the room, but I hit the door, so I did what I said I was going to do. It's accurate. Precise, completely different concept, right? We have to understand this is what I intend to do. Did that intention manifest itself? So back to our glamour graphics that we had, if I said I stopped 11 things, it has to be out of 11, or out of 50, or out of anything other than out of mystery. Right? So that's how we can get to a point where we're empirically measuring programs, which allows us to grow. Does everyone know what a TTP is? So now we're going to get into, we have to measure things, but we're going to need to be a little bit more sophisticated than hit a button, hope that somebody measures it for us. Right? I've tried that my whole life. You could see by this body it didn't work, that I could like take a pill or hit a button and be, you know, super buff. Didn't work out. But exercise is something that we need in the programs. And these are common things that attackers do. In 2014, I started this project with, if anyone has ever heard of this, called MITRE Attack Framework. I started working with the MITRE team to discuss why do these attacks continue to work? Question. How many attacks do you think use exploits? Let's say all of them, most of them, barely any. Anyone have an answer for me? Barely any. Winner. These are all of the phases that an attacker takes through an attacker's life cycle, not comprehensively, but most of them. If you look through attack today and search for exploit, you will find it mentioned 6 times. Out of those 6 times, across all of the different operating systems in which attack is covered, 6 times, between Windows, Linux, cloud, et cetera, 6. Out of almost 400 separate controls. So do you think vulnerability data is really that important when the vast majority of what attackers do don't exploit systems? Right? This is where we start to make progress. This is where we start to divorce ourselves from vulnerability because guess what? There's always going to be a vulnerability you don't know about. And then what? Then what do? We have to have confidence in our program. So the reason that we built this is to be able to use a common language to describe what happened in the environment. What did the attackers do? It wasn't just, they clicked a bunch of buttons, they magically stole all of our money. There's a lot of things that we could do in the middle of that to potentially intercept or at least determine, hey guys, money's going out the window, let's maybe not let all of it go out. And they're like, okay, good. We stopped part of the attack. Great, that's a huge success in comparison to losing everything. How do we meet that? Well, here's the easy, bad decoder ring. Oh, P.S., I'm awful at Excel. I make terrible graphics, but it's all I got, right? So if you take these attacker frameworks, right, and you can say, oh, when an attacker breaks in, they're going to figure out how to execute things, they're going to make persistence, they're going to keep hold of the machine, they're going to build a bunch of backdoors, and be like, all right, well, if you find this, then you're not going to find that, or if you find this on this system, I'm going to make a different one there, different one here, different one there, build C2, have it call home, right? Standard attacker stuff. Because when my ransomware works, I don't want you to go and delete that one system. I want you to know that after you try and mess with me, I'm going to go harder. And if you do it again, it's going to be a real bad day in the office. And if you do it again, everything's mine and all your bases are belong to me, not you anymore. Bye-bye business. But how do you find them? And what most people haven't figured out is that the most standard thing in all of security is not the standards. It's how attackers attack. Attackers have to do the same stuff every time. You, as a business, have to do all this crazy stuff. Attackers, literally, lather, rinse, repeat. What do? I get in, I maintain persistence, I go look for cool stuff, I figure out whether I want to exfil it, I sort that out, I build up my privileges in the network, I get all of this stuff home. Every time. Happens the same every time, right? So that's the lowest common denominator that we can defend against. So we can take our controls and say, oh, I have stuff that will find the lateral movement. Or maybe you lay your controls over and you go, hey, we don't have anything that fits this column. It's a really easy way to figure out, am I going to be able to see and or stop and defend myself? Right? So you can understand attack. If you want to use the framework itself, it's quite in depth, right? We've made it a big, giant dictionary so that if someone says credentials from password stores, what does that mean? Well, good, we have a whole bunch of sub-techniques. We can tell you what groups are using it. We can tell you how they use it. If you want to replicate it yourself to see if stealing credentials that way works or doesn't work. I mean, does anyone in here believe the glossy piece of paper from their antivirus vendor that said we stop everything? No, because it doesn't work. There's always a way around it. So you have to figure out what do we do when that case happens, because that's the part we have to deal with. The stuff that it's successful, great. Pat it on the back, say, good job, keep going. Measuring, right? All about measurement. We have to understand how our controls work. We have to understand how detections work. And we have to understand how much coverage we have, right? That's the trinity of being able to do security performance engineering versus security hope engineering, right? When you're measuring performance, you can't believe any of your tools are going to do what they say until you prove it. And if you prove it and prove how your environment reacts, then you understand how to process that telemetry, right? So if my whatever APT Pro 5000 advanced level, whatever it's called, makes a blinky blue light, if I don't know what that means, then it just made a blinky blue light, and then they go, oh, it caught the attack. And you're like, what do you mean? You're like, oh, when it blinks blue, that means it caught the attack. And you're like, oh, right on. New info. Now I know what to do with that. But if you could measure that, right, that's the core of a program of how you perform. Right? So you can score yourself against these things and start to determine where are my weak spots? Where am I going to catch somebody? Where are they likely to slip by? You don't have to catch all of it. You just have to catch it once. That's the coolest part about defense. Offense, you have to be right all the time Because like when you slip up, the defender catches it once and you're on for a fight. So no more invisible measuring tape, no more fake graphs, right? We want to understand how effective we are against a Russian APT group. Like specific, what is that group? We break down all of the tactics that they're using, and we go through, how do we check this? How do we see it? How do we stop it, right? These are defenses that advanced programs, when we talk about apex defenders that are the best in the world, this is how they start to measure themselves, because they have to understand everything fails at some point. We need to take that and we need to make it better. We need to say, I took 20 things and I made a ton of detections and now I'm better than I could have ever been. So we get our glamour graphs out of it. We create positive addiction. No more addiction to bad. I found 900 highs. How about I found 900 goods? That's the end of the list. This is the too boring. I didn't listen to any of the slides. Totally fine. I don't care. This will sum it up for you. Makes it much easier. Just doesn't have the funny memes. That's me. Thank you.